Millionaire CEO secretly followed black single mother home, discovers he's the father of her triplets. Are you our daddy? 5-year-old Zara's voice cut through the afternoon air like a knife, her amber eyes, so startlingly familiar, fixed on the tall stranger who had just saved her brother's life. The man froze, his own identical golden eyes widening in shock as he stared down at the little girl who looked exactly like him. "If you're our daddy, where have you been?" she demanded, crossing her small arms with an expression far too serious for a child her age. The man's voice cracked as he knelt down to her level. "Being very, very stupid," he whispered. "And very, very sorry." Hold on to that moment, because what you're about to hear is one of the most powerful stories about love, loss, and second chances you'll ever encounter. But before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of redemption and second chances, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now, because trust me, you don't want to miss a single story from Luck's Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nathaniel Kane's corner office with an intensity that matched the storm raging inside his chest. Each droplet was a percussion note in the symphony of his restless thoughts, creating a rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of his tortured heart. At 32 years old, he commanded a technology empire worth $3 billion. Yet tonight, he sat completely alone in his mahogany-paneled sanctuary, nursing a glass of aged whiskey that had long since lost its warmth. His reflection stared back from the rain-streaked glass, a man who had everything money could buy, yet possessed nothing that truly mattered. Sharp jawline shadowed with stubble from a day spent in turmoil, dark eyes that had charmed investors and intimidated competitors across Silicon Valley, silver threading through black hair at his temples like premature wisdom earned through years of relentless ambition. Success had carved lines of determination into his features, but tonight those same lines spoke of something else entirely, profound, soul-crushing loneliness. The decision that had haunted him for 6 long years pressed against his chest like a physical weight, making each breath a struggle. Serena. Even thinking her name sent electricity coursing through his veins, a current of desire and regret so potent it nearly buckled his knees. She had been fire and silk, intellect and passion wrapped in bronze skin that seemed to glow from within. Their love affair had burned bright and all-consuming, like a wildfire that couldn't be contained, until the moment she whispered those 3 life-changing words that would alter the trajectory of both their lives forever. "I'm pregnant." He had been 26 then, hungry and desperate to prove himself in Silicon Valley's cutthroat landscape where fortunes were made and lost before breakfast. The thought of responsibility, of being tied down when his company needed every ounce of his focus and energy, had terrified him into making what would become the cruelest choice of his life. He'd walked away, leaving only a check, cold, impersonal money, and empty promises about when the timing was better. 6 years of silence. 6 years of wondering. 6 years of building an empire while destroying the only thing that had ever truly mattered. "Mr. Kane." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, startling him from his brooding. "Your 7 o'clock meeting has been waiting for 15 minutes. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. How could he explain that he'd forgotten about the meeting entirely? That for the past 3 hours, he'd been staring at photographs that had arrived in a manila envelope, images that had shattered his carefully constructed world like glass hitting concrete? "Cancel it," he said finally, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Cancel everything for the rest of the week." "Sir? But the board meeting tomorrow, cancel. Everything." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the continued assault of rain against the windows. Nathaniel's gaze drifted back to the photographs scattered across his mahogany desk like pieces of a puzzle he'd never known he needed to solve. The investigation had been meant to ease his guilt, nothing more. A simple background check to confirm that Serena was safe, that she was thriving, that his absence hadn't destroyed her life the way it had slowly been destroying his. But the results had been anything but simple. Serena Washington, age 30. Residing in Oakland, California. Registered nurse at Children's Hospital. Single mother of 3. 3. The number had echoed in his mind like a gunshot when he first read it, but it was the photographs that had brought him to his knees. There she was, more beautiful than memory had painted her, walking hand in hand with 3 small children who appeared to be around 5 years old. 2 boys and a girl, all with the same striking features that had made Serena unforgettable, all with skin the perfect blend of her bronze and his olive complexion. But it was their eyes that had stopped his breath entirely and sent the whiskey glass shattering in his grip. Even in the grainy long-distance surveillance photos, he could see they had inherited his unusual amber gold irises, a genetic quirk passed down through generations of his family like a signature written in DNA. His children, his blood, his legacy, raised without him, shaped without his influence, loved without his presence. Dear God, he whispered into the empty office, his voice breaking on the words. What have I done? The photographs told a story he'd never imagined. There was Serena, coming home from work in scrubs. She'd become a nurse, he realized with a surge of pride mixed with devastating shame. While he'd been building his empire in glass towers, she'd been saving lives and raising their children alone. The photos showed her exhaustion, the way her shoulders sagged after long shifts, but they also showed something else. Incredible strength, the kind that only comes from absolute necessity. And the children, God, the children. There was one photo of them playing in the front yard, their laughter almost audible even through the static image. 3 5-year-olds full of life and energy, tumbling over each other like puppies, their faces bright with joy despite growing up without their father. Isaiah, Gabriel, and Zara, he read from the investigator's notes, his voice barely a whisper. Their names felt foreign on his tongue, like words in a language he'd never learned but desperately wanted to speak. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 6 years becoming everything he thought success looked like: the penthouse overlooking the bay, the fleet of luxury cars, the private jet, the respect of industry titans. He could buy anything, go anywhere, have anyone. But he couldn't buy back 6 years of bedtime stories. He couldn't purchase his way into 5 birthday parties he'd missed. He couldn't invest his way into family dinners filled with childish laughter and innocent questions about his day. Nathaniel stood abruptly, his chair spinning backward as he moved to the window. The city sprawled below him, millions of lights twinkling like earthbound stars, each one representing lives being lived, families being built, love being shared. Somewhere out there, in a modest house in Oakland, 3 children were probably getting ready for bed, and they had no idea their father was standing in a tower 30 miles away, staring into the darkness and finally understanding what he'd lost. What would you do if you discovered you'd been living a lie for 6 years? He asked his reflection. What would you do if everything you thought mattered suddenly meant nothing at all? His reflection had no answers, just the hollow stare of a man who'd gained the world but lost his soul in the process. By morning, Nathaniel had made a decision that would change everything. The rain had stopped, replaced by the kind of crisp California sunshine that made everything look possible, even redemption. He canceled his board meetings, delegated urgent projects to his capable vice president, and instructed his longtime driver, Michael, to take him to Oakland. "We're in Oakland, sir?" Michael asked, glancing in the rearview mirror with concern. In 8 years of service, he'd never seen his employer look so broken. "I'll give you the address when we get closer," Nathaniel replied, unable to voice his destination out loud. How could he explain that he was going to spy on the woman he'd abandoned and the children he'd never known existed? The drive across the Bay Bridge felt like a journey to another world. Gone were the gleaming glass towers and manicured perfection of Marin County. Oakland greeted them with vibrant murals covering brick walls, the scent of diverse cuisines mingling in the air, and a sense of authentic community that his wealth had never been able to purchase. "Turn left here," Nathaniel directed as they entered a neighborhood that seemed to pulse with life. Children played on sidewalks while parents called to them from front porches. Gardens bloomed in tiny yards, and music drifted from open windows, the kind of music that came from actual instruments, not expensive sound systems. "This one," he said quietly as they approached a modest 2-story house painted sage green with white trim. Flower boxes burst with color under every window, and a small garden gate hung slightly askew as if recently swung open by excited children. This was nothing like the sterile luxury of his Marin County estate, with its perfect landscaping and echo-filled rooms. Yet something about the warmth radiating from this simple house made his chest ache with a longing so profound he could barely breathe. "Should I wait, sir?" Michael asked carefully. "Yes. Park across the street. I just need to." Nathaniel's voice trailed off. What did he need to do? What was his plan? For the first time in his business career, he was operating without a strategy, driven purely by instinct and desperate need. "I'll be a while," he said finally. Movement in the front yard caught his attention, and his heart nearly stopped. 3 small children with bronze skin and familiar amber eyes were playing with sidewalk chalk, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze like music. They moved with the boundless energy of 5-year-olds, completely absorbed in their artistic endeavors. Nathaniel found himself leaning forward in the back seat, hungry for every detail of these children he'd never met. The tallest boy, Isaiah, according to the notes, was carefully drawing what appeared to be a family of stick figures. The other boy, Gabriel, was creating an elaborate racetrack for toy cars. And the girl, Zara, was working on something that looked like a house, complete with windows and a garden. Are they drawing their family? Nathaniel wondered aloud, then caught himself. Of course they were. And that family consisted of a mother and 3 children. No father figure in sight, because he had forfeited that right 6 years ago when fear overcame love. A car turned into the driveway, and Nathaniel's world tilted on its axis. Serena emerged from a modest sedan, and she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Time had only refined her beauty, adding depth to her dark eyes and strength to the set of her shoulders. She wore scrubs, evidence of the long shift she'd just completed saving other people's children while raising her own. The exhaustion was evident in her posture, in the slight slump of shoulders that had once been held high with youthful confidence. But even tired, even worn down by the responsibilities he'd left her to bear alone, she was magnificent. "Mama!" The 3 children abandoned their artwork and ran toward her like puppies greeting their favorite person in the world. They wrapped themselves around her legs, all talking at once in the way only excited 5-year-olds could manage. "We drew pictures," Gabriel announced proudly. "I made a racetrack for my cars," Isaiah added. "And I drew our house, but I made the garden bigger because I want to plant flowers like Mrs. Rodriguez next door," Zara explained with the serious expression she seemed to wear constantly. Serena's laugh was like music, rich and warm and full of the kind of joy that comes from unconditional love. She knelt down to their level, giving each child her full attention as they showed off their creations, praising their artwork with the enthusiasm of a critic at the Met. Nathaniel watched this intimate family tableau with the desperate hunger of a starving man pressed against a restaurant window. These should have been his moments, his hugs, his stories about preschool adventures and playground discoveries, his laughter mixing with theirs as they shared the simple joy of being together. For 6 years, he'd convinced himself that walking away had been noble, that he'd been protecting them from his inevitable failure as a father. But watching Serena with their children, seeing the love and stability she'd created despite his abandonment, he realized the truth. He hadn't protected anyone. He'd simply been a coward. "Sir." Michael's voice was gentle but concerned. "Are you all right?" Nathaniel realized he was crying. "When had that started?" "I'm fine," he lied, wiping his cheeks with the back of his hand. "I just need to see them, to understand what I—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "What I threw away. What I destroyed. What I lost." As the family disappeared into the house, Nathaniel made a decision that surprised even him. "Michael, I want you to go back to the city. I'll call when I need you." "Sir? How will you get home?" Nathaniel was already getting out of the car. "I'll figure it out. I need to be here. I need to understand their world." Michael looked like he wanted to argue, but 8 years of employment had taught him when his boss's mind was made up. "I'll have my phone, sir. Call anytime." As the sedan pulled away, Nathaniel found himself alone on a street corner in Oakland, 30 miles from his empire, staring at a house that contained everything he'd never known he wanted. He had no plan, no strategy, no idea what he would say if they saw him. All he knew was that he couldn't leave. Not again. Not until he found some way to make amends for the 6 years of absence. The 6 years of birthdays and bedtime stories and scraped knees that he'd missed while building monuments to his own ambition. For the first time in his adult life, Nathaniel Kane wasn't thinking about quarterly earnings or market share or investor relations. He was thinking about 3 children who carried his eyes but didn't know his name, and a woman who had once loved him enough to forgive anything except abandonment. The afternoon sun beat down on the sidewalk as he settled in to watch, to learn, to hope for some sign that redemption might be possible, even for someone who had thrown away the greatest gift life had to offer. The next morning arrived with the kind of golden California sunshine that seemed to mock Nathaniel's dark mood. He had spent the night in a nearby hotel, tossing and turning as images of three amber-eyed children played behind his closed eyelids. By 6 a.m., he was dressed and standing on that same corner, coffee in hand, waiting for the house to come alive. He didn't have to wait long. The front door burst open at exactly 7:15, and three small tornadoes of energy exploded onto the front porch. Gabriel was the first out, his dark curls still messy from sleep, clutching a toy dinosaur that had clearly seen better days. Isaiah followed, meticulously dressed and carrying a small backpack that looked almost too neat for a 5-year-old. And finally, Zara emerged, her hair in perfect braids adorned with colorful beads that caught the morning light. "Mama, Isaiah's being bossy again." Gabriel called back toward the house, his voice carrying the particular whine that only little brothers could master. "I'm not being bossy," Isaiah replied with 5-year-old dignity. "I'm being responsible. Mrs. Chun said we need to remember our lunch boxes and our permission slips for the field trip." "What's a permission slip?" Gabriel asked, looking genuinely confused. "It's a paper that says Mama lets us go places," Zara explained with the patience of someone who clearly served as the family translator. "Like when we went to the zoo last month." Serena appeared in the doorway, and Nathaniel's heart did that familiar skip that had plagued him for 6 years. She was beautiful in the morning light, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing scrubs that suggested she was heading to work after dropping the children off somewhere. "Did everyone brush their teeth?" she asked, doing that maternal skin that seemed to take inventory of everything from shoelaces to backpack zippers in a single glance. "Yes, Mama," all three children chorused, though Gabriel quickly clamped his hand over his mouth as if suddenly remembering he'd forgotten. "Gabriel Washington, march yourself back in there right now," Serena said with the kind of loving authority that brooked no argument. As Gabriel disappeared into the house, Isaiah looked up at his mother with those impossibly familiar amber eyes. "Mama, why don't we have a daddy like Tommy at school?" The question hit Nathaniel like a physical blow, and he watched Serena's face carefully, noting the way her smile faltered for just a moment before she knelt down to Isaiah's level. "Well, sweetheart," she said carefully, "families come in all different shapes and sizes. Some have mommies and daddies, some have just mommies, some have just daddies, and some have grandparents or aunts and uncles. What matters isn't how many people are in your family, but how much love you have. But do we have a daddy somewhere?" Zara asked with that direct way children had of cutting straight to the heart of complex issues. "I mean, everyone comes from somewhere, right?" Serena was quiet for a long moment, and Nathaniel found himself holding his breath, desperate to hear her answer. "Yes, baby girl," she said finally. "You have a daddy. But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and they make choices that hurt people they love." "Did our daddy make a mistake?" Isaiah asked, his young face serious. "A very big one," Serena whispered, and Nathaniel felt each word like a knife to his chest. Gabriel returned with many fresh breath, blissfully unaware of the serious conversation that had just taken place. "Can we get pancakes after daycare, Mama? The kind with the faces you make with blueberries." The moment broke, and Serena stood with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll see, baby. Now come on, everyone in the car. Mama has to work, and you have a field trip to the Science Museum." Nathaniel watched as she herded the children toward the car, helping with seat belts and backpacks with the efficiency of someone who had perfected the morning routine through necessity. As they drove away, he felt an overwhelming urge to follow them, to see every moment of their day, to understand the rhythm of the life he'd abandoned. Instead, he remained on the corner, watching the house grow quiet, imagining what it would be like to be part of that morning chaos. To answer Isaiah's questions about permission slips, to remind Gabriel about toothbrushing, to braid Zara's hair and listen to her serious observations about the world. "What are you doing, Nathaniel?" he asked himself aloud. "What's your endgame here?" But he knew he couldn't answer that question. Not yet. All he knew was that walking away again wasn't an option. Not when he'd seen what he'd missed, what he'd thrown away for the sake of quarterly reports and board meetings. The day stretched endlessly. Nathaniel found himself memorizing every detail of the neighborhood. The elderly woman next door who tended her garden with loving care, the teenager across the street who washed his car with careful attention, the general sense of community that seemed to embrace everyone who lived here. This was so different from his gated community in Marin County, where neighbors barely spoke and privacy was valued above connection. Here, people called out greetings to each other, Children played freely in front yards, and there was a warmth that money couldn't buy. At 3:30, Nathaniel's heart began to race as he anticipated their return. He positioned himself with a clear view of the driveway, pretending to read a newspaper while actually watching every car that turned onto the street. When Serena's sedan finally appeared, he felt a surge of something he couldn't quite name. Relief? Anticipation? Joy at seeing those three small faces again? The children tumbled out of the car with even more energy than they'd had that morning, chattering excitedly about their field trip. "Mama, we saw a real dinosaur skeleton," Gabriel announced, his toy dinosaur held high in triumph. And the museum lady said it was almost as old as Grandma. "Gabriel," Zara scolded, "you can't say Grandma is old." "But she is old," Isaiah pointed out with 5-year-old logic. "She told us she was old. She said she earned every one of her wrinkles." Serena laughed, that same rich sound that had once filled Nathaniel's world with music. "Grandma did say that, didn't she? Now, who wants to help me make those pancakes I promised?" Me. All three children shouted, racing toward the house. For the next hour, Nathaniel watched through the kitchen window as Serena and the children made dinner together. The scene was so domestic, so perfect, that it made his chest ache with longing. Gabriel stood on a step stool, carefully measuring flour while getting more on himself than in the bowl. Isaiah was in charge of cracking eggs, approaching the task with his characteristic seriousness. And Zara was mixing batter with the focused concentration of a master chef. "Look, Mama," Gabriel called out, his face covered in flour. "I'm a ghost." "You're definitely something," Serena laughed, wiping his face with a kitchen towel. "Now help Zara with that mixing." "Isaiah, how are those eggs coming?" "Perfect," Isaiah announced proudly, showing off a bowl with what appeared to be perfectly separated eggs. "No shells at all." "That's my responsible boy," Serena said, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. Watching them together, Nathaniel was struck by how seamlessly they functioned as a unit. There was no chaos, no shouting, just the easy rhythm of a family that worked together. Serena had created something beautiful here, something stable and loving, and she'd done it all without him. The guilt was overwhelming. While he'd been in boardrooms negotiating million-dollar deals, she'd been teaching their children to cook, to be kind to each other, to work as a team. While he'd been buying expensive art for his penthouse walls, she'd been creating a home filled with laughter and love and the kind of memories that actually mattered. As evening fell and lights began to flicker on in windows throughout the neighborhood, Nathaniel found himself thinking about his own childhood. His father had been successful too, a powerful attorney who valued achievement above all else. Nathaniel could count on one hand the number of times they'd cooked together, the number of bedtime stories his father had read, the number of school events he'd attended. Was that the kind of father he would have been? Distant and driven, more concerned with providing financially than being present emotionally? "No," he said aloud, startling himself with the vehemence in his voice. "No, I would have been different. I would have been better. But would he have?" 6 years ago, when Serena told him she was pregnant, his first thought hadn't been joy or excitement. It had been panic about how it would affect his company, his future, his carefully laid plans. He'd been so focused on becoming successful that he'd missed the opportunity to become something far more important, a father. The second day of surveillance was harder than the first. Nathaniel woke with a headache and a deep sense of shame that seemed to have settled into his bones. He took up his position on the street corner earlier, driven by a compulsion he didn't fully understand. This time, he witnessed the aftermath of what appeared to be a minor crisis. Gabriel emerged from the house in tears, clutching the remains of his beloved dinosaur toy. Apparently, it had suffered a catastrophic break during the night. "It's broken," Gabriel sobbed, showing the severed dinosaur head to his mother. "Rex is broken." Serena knelt down and examined the toy with the seriousness of a surgeon. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "sometimes when things we love get broken, we have to decide if they're worth fixing. But how do we fix Rex?" Gabriel asked, his tears slowing as hope crept into his voice. "With love, patience, and maybe a little super glue," Serena replied. "But first, we need to get you and your brother and sister to daycare. We'll work on Rex when we get home, okay?" "Promise?" Gabriel asked. "Promise," Serena confirmed, sealing the vow with a kiss on his forehead. Nathaniel watched this exchange with wonder. Such a small moment, but handled with such care, such thoughtfulness. Serena could have easily dismissed Gabriel's tears as childish, could have promised to buy him a new toy. Instead, she'd validated his feelings and offered hope for restoration. That afternoon, he watched as she sat on the front porch with Gabriel and a tube of super glue, carefully reattaching Rex's head while explaining the importance of taking care of things we love. "See," she said as Gabriel examined the repaired dinosaur with wonder. "Sometimes broken things can be even stronger after they're fixed, because they've been put back together with extra love." Gabriel hugged his dinosaur tight, then looked up at his mother with those amber eyes that were so much like Nathaniel's own. "Mama, could you fix anything that was broken?" Serena was quiet for a moment, and Nathaniel saw something flicker across her face. Pain, perhaps, or longing. "I can try, baby," she said finally. "But some things stay broken for a very long time before the right person comes along to help fix them." The third day nearly broke Nathaniel's resolve entirely. He arrived at his post to find the house unusually quiet. No children playing in the yard, no morning chaos of getting ready for daycare. Growing worried, he moved closer to the house, staying hidden behind a neighbor's hedge. Through the window, he could see Serena moving around what appeared to be a sick child. Isaiah was lying on the couch, clearly running a fever, while his mother took his temperature and offered comfort. "It's just a little bug, sweetheart," she was saying, her voice gentle and soothing. "You need to rest and drink lots of fluids." "But what about Gabriel and Zara?" Isaiah asked weakly. "They can't stay home from daycare because of me." "Don't you worry about your brother and sister," Serena replied. "Mama will figure it out." Nathaniel watched as she made phone calls, clearly trying to arrange care for the other two children while staying home with Isaiah. He could see the stress in her posture, the way she ran her hand through her hair as conversation after conversation apparently didn't yield the results she needed. Finally, an older woman arrived, their grandmother, Nathaniel assumed, and took Gabriel and Zara away for the day. Serena spent the rest of the morning tending to Isaiah with the dedicated attention of both a mother and a trained nurse. Watching her care for their sick child, Nathaniel felt a profound sense of uselessness. This was a moment when a father should be present, should be helping, should be sharing the worry and the responsibility. Instead, Serena was handling it alone, just as she'd handled everything alone for 6 years. As the afternoon wore on and Isaiah seemed to be feeling better, Nathaniel made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't continue this surveillance indefinitely. He couldn't keep watching their lives from the shadows like some sort of stalker. Either he found the courage to approach them, to try to make amends, or he walked away forever and let them continue their lives without the complication of his presence. The decision was made for him the next day in a way he never could have anticipated. It was Saturday morning, and the whole family was out enjoying the weekend. They'd walked to a nearby park, and Nathaniel had followed at a distance, telling himself this would be his last day of observation. After this, he would either find the courage to approach them or he would return to his empty penthouse and try to forget what he'd seen. The children were playing in the small playground while Serena sat on a bench, occasionally calling out encouragement or warnings about being careful. Nathaniel positioned himself behind a large oak tree, close enough to observe but far enough away to remain undetected. Isaiah and Gabriel were kicking a soccer ball back and forth while Zara played on the swings, pumping her legs with determination to go higher and higher. It was such a normal family scene, such a perfect Saturday morning, that Nathaniel felt his heart breaking all over again. Then the ball got away from Isaiah, bouncing toward the street that bordered the park. "I'll get it," Isaiah called out, running after the ball without thinking, without looking, without considering the danger. Nathaniel saw the car before anyone else did. A white sedan, moving too fast, the driver probably not expecting a child to dart into the street. Time seemed to slow down as Nathaniel realized what was about to happen. Isaiah was going to run directly into the path of that car, and there wasn't enough time for Serena to reach him. But there was enough time for Nathaniel. He was running before conscious thought kicked in, his body moving on pure instinct and adrenaline. The distance between him and Isaiah seemed both infinite and instantaneous. He could hear Serena screaming behind him, could hear the screech of brakes as the driver finally saw what was happening. Nathaniel scooped Isaiah up just as the car's bumper would have made contact, both of them tumbling safely onto the sidewalk in a tangle of limbs. The car stopped mere inches from where Isaiah had been standing, the driver jumping out with a face white with shock. "Oh my God, is he okay?" "I didn't see him. He just ran out. He's fine," Nathaniel said quickly, his heart pounding so hard he could barely speak. He's fine. Isaiah was indeed fine, though clearly shaken. But as Nathaniel held him, the child looked up into his face with those unmistakable amber eyes and said something that stopped the world. "Daddy?" he whispered, the word soft and wondering, as if some deep instinct had recognized what his young mind couldn't fully comprehend. "Are you my daddy?" The question hung in the air like a prayer, like an accusation, like a miracle. Before Nathaniel could respond, Serena was there, her face a mask of terror and relief and something else, recognition. "Isaiah," she cried, reaching for her son. "Oh God, baby, are you hurt? Are you okay?" She checked him over with shaking hands, maternal instinct taking over as she searched for any sign of injury. Only when she was satisfied that he was unharmed did she look up at the man who had saved her child's life. The color drained from her face as their eyes met. "Nathaniel," she breathed, his name escaping her lips like a ghost from the past. Gabriel and Zara had run over during the commotion, and now all three children were staring at this stranger who had appeared like a guardian angel to save their brother. The family resemblance was impossible to miss. The same eyes, the same bone structure, the same stubborn set to their jaws. "Hello, Serena," Nathaniel managed, his voice rough with emotion. Isaiah was still in his arms, still staring at him with that curious, knowing expression. "You have pretty eyes," Isaiah announced solemnly, seemingly unfazed by his near-death experience. "Like mine." Gabriel stepped closer, his young face scrunched up in concentration. "Are you the daddy who made the mistake?" he asked with the brutal honesty that only children could manage. The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. These children knew about him, had asked about him, had been told he existed but had made a terrible mistake. The weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. "Yes," he said quietly, meeting Gabriel's curious gaze. "I'm the daddy who made the biggest mistake in the world." Zara, ever the protector, crossed her small arms and fixed him with a stare that was unervingly mature. "If you're our daddy, where have you been?" she demanded. "Mama works really hard, and she gets tired, and sometimes she cries when she thinks we're asleep." Each word was like a dagger to his heart. He had caused those tears, that exhaustion, that struggle. He had been living in luxury while the woman he loved worked herself to exhaustion raising the children he'd abandoned. "I've been being very, very stupid," Nathaniel admitted, his voice cracking with emotion. "And very, very sorry. Are you going to leave again?" Gabriel asked, moving to stand protectively next to his sister. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of 6 years of absence. Nathaniel looked at each of their faces, Isaiah still in his arms, Gabriel and Zara standing guard over their family, and Serena watching him with an expression that mixed hope and terror in equal measure. "Never," he said with quiet conviction. "If your mama lets me, I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life making up for the time I missed." The children looked at each other in that wordless communication that siblings share, then turned to Serena, as if seeking permission to hope. "Can he come home with us, Mama?" Isaiah asked, his small hand coming up to touch Nathaniel's cheek with innocent trust. "Can our daddy come home?" Serena's eyes filled with tears as she looked at this tableau, her 3 children with the father they'd never known, the man who had broken her heart 6 years ago but had just risked his life to save their son. The answer to that question would determine the course of all their lives. The afternoon sun beat down on them as they stood frozen in this moment of possibility, this crossroads where the past and future collided in a small park in Oakland, and everything hung in the balance of what Serena would say next. Serena stared at the man holding her son, her mind reeling as 6 years of carefully constructed walls began to crumble. The children were looking at her expectantly, their innocent faces filled with hope and curiosity, waiting for an answer that would shape their understanding of family, forgiveness, and second chances. "Mama," Isaiah prompted softly, still nestled in Nathaniel's arms. "Can our daddy come home with us?" The word home hit both adults like lightning. Home. As if Nathaniel belonged there, as if 6 years of absence could be erased by one heroic moment. But looking at her children's faces, Gabriel's eager expression, Zara's cautious hope, Isaiah's absolute trust in the man who had just saved his life, Serena realized this wasn't just about her anymore. "I think," she said carefully, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest, "that your daddy and I need to have a conversation first. But..." She paused, seeing the disappointment beginning to cloud their features. "But maybe he could walk home with us. If he wants to." The children erupted in cheers, their joy so pure and immediate that it brought tears to Nathaniel's eyes. This was what he'd missed, this unbridled happiness, this ability to find magic in the simplest of possibilities. "I would like that very much," Nathaniel said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Serena." The walk back to their house was surreal. Gabriel skipped ahead, chattering excitedly about everything and nothing, while Zara walked beside Serena, clearly processing this monumental development with her characteristic seriousness. Isaiah had insisted on walking between Nathaniel and Serena, holding both their hands as if afraid one of them might disappear. "Our house isn't very big," Gabriel announced over his shoulder, apparently feeling the need to manage expectations. "But it's really cozy, and we have a fort in the living room, and Mama lets us eat breakfast in it on Sundays." "It sounds perfect," Nathaniel replied, and meant it. After 6 years in a sterile penthouse that echoed with his own loneliness, the idea of a cozy house filled with children's laughter sounded like paradise. "Do you know how to play checkers?" Zara asked suddenly, fixing Nathaniel with that intense stare that seemed far too mature for a 5-year-old. "I do," Nathaniel answered. "Do you?" "I'm really good at it," Zara said with quiet confidence. "I beat Uncle Marcus last week, and he's a grown-up." "Maybe you could teach me your strategy sometime," Nathaniel suggested. Zara considered this seriously. "Maybe. If you're really staying." The conditional nature of her acceptance wasn't lost on him. These children had been hurt by his absence in ways he was only beginning to understand, and their trust would have to be earned, not simply expected. As they approached the sage-green house with its cheerful flower boxes, Nathaniel felt his heart constrict with longing. This was what a home looked like, lived in, loved, real. Not like his showcase penthouse that could have been featured in Architectural Digest, but had never felt like anything more than an expensive hotel room. "This is our house," Isaiah announced proudly, gesturing toward the modest 2-story building as if it were a palace. Mama painted it this color because she said it reminded her of growing things. Serena's cheeks flushed slightly at this revelation. "Isaiah, I think it's beautiful," Nathaniel interrupted gently. "It looks like a house where people are happy." Their eyes met over Isaiah's head, and for a moment, the years fell away. Serena had always loved green, had talked about wanting a house painted in earth tones, surrounded by a garden where children could play safely. She'd achieved that dream without him, and the knowledge was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "Can I show him my room?" Gabriel asked, bouncing on his toes with excitement. "And my race cars? And the picture I drew of our family?" Gabriel slowed down, Serena laughed, but her smile was genuine. Let's take this one step at a time." They climbed the front steps together, and Nathaniel noticed the small details that spoke of a life well lived. Chalk drawings on the sidewalk, a pair of tiny sneakers forgotten by the door, a wind chime made from painted shells that tinkled softly in the afternoon breeze. "Should I?" Nathaniel hesitated at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. "Should I wait out here?" "I don't want to presume. Don't be silly," Isaiah said, tugging on his hand. "Come see our house. We have pictures on the refrigerator and everything." The interior of the house was exactly what Nathaniel had expected and nothing like his own pristine living space. The walls were covered with children's artwork, family photos, and hand-painted signs that read things like "Love lives here" and "Family is everything." Toys were scattered across the living room floor in organized chaos, and the scent of something delicious, cinnamon and vanilla, lingered in the air. It was smaller than his penthouse bathroom, but it radiated warmth and love in a way that made his chest ache with longing. "This is our fort," Gabriel announced, pointing to an elaborate construction of blankets and pillows stretched between 2 chairs. "We eat breakfast in there on Sundays, and sometimes Mama reads us stories before bed. And this is where we do puzzles," Zara added, indicating a low table covered with colorful pieces. "We're working on one that has 1,000 pieces. It's really hard, but Mama says the best things are worth working for." Nathaniel caught Serena's eye at this last comment, wondering if she'd said it with him in mind, if she'd been teaching their children about patience and perseverance while he'd been learning about quarterly projections and market analysis. "These are my cars," Isaiah said, proudly displaying a collection of toy vehicles arranged with military precision on a small shelf. "This red one is the fastest, but this blue one is my favorite because it looks like Mama's car." Nathaniel knelt down to examine the cars with the seriousness they deserved. "This is quite a collection," he said admiringly. Do you know what kind of cars these are supposed to be? Isaiah's face lit up. You know about cars? A little bit, Nathaniel replied. Would you like me to tell you about them? For the next 20 minutes, Nathaniel found himself sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by three fascinated 5-year-olds as he explained the differences between sports cars and sedans, the basics of how engines worked, and the history of some of the classic car designs represented in Isaiah's collection. Serena watched from the kitchen doorway, a dish towel in her hands and a complex expression on her face. This was what she'd imagined during those long nights when she was pregnant, Nathaniel sitting on the floor with their children, sharing his knowledge, making them laugh with his stories. She'd never gotten to see it happen, had convinced herself it never would, and now here it was, 6 years late but somehow still magical. You know a lot about cars, Gabriel observed, clearly impressed. I used to work on them when I was younger, Nathaniel explained. My grandfather had a garage, and I spent summers learning how to fix engines and paint bodywork. Could you teach us? Zara asked, and there was something in her voice that suggested this was a test. I mean, if you're really going to stay. Again, that conditional acceptance. These children were protecting themselves and their mother in the only way they knew how, by not investing too much hope in someone who had already proven he could disappear. I would love to teach you, Nathaniel said solemnly. If your mama says it's okay, and if you want to learn. Can we, Mama? All three children chorused, turning to Serena with pleading expressions. Serena looked at their eager faces, then at Nathaniel, who was watching her with an expression of desperate hope mixed with complete understanding that this was her decision to make. We'll see, she said finally, and the children seemed to accept this as progress. Right now, though, it's almost dinner time. Who wants to help me make spaghetti? The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Me. As the children rushed toward the kitchen, Nathaniel stood slowly, brushing dust from his expensive suit pants. The designer clothing looked completely out of place in this warm, chaotic family home. Serena, he said quietly, I know this is overwhelming. If you want me to leave, stay for dinner, she interrupted, surprising them both. The children clearly want you here, and I. She paused, searching for words. I need to understand what this is. What you want. What you're really doing here. I want to be their father, Nathaniel said without hesitation. I want to be the man I should have been 6 years ago. And what about me? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and Serena immediately regretted the vulnerability it revealed. Nathaniel stepped closer, careful not to invade her space, but close enough that she could see the sincerity in his amber eyes. I want to earn the right to love you again, he said quietly. I know I don't deserve it. Know I hurt you in ways that might be unforgivable. But Serena, I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. Before she could respond to this declaration, Gabriel's voice rang out from the kitchen. Mama, I can't reach the pasta. The moment broke, and Serena hurried toward the kitchen, leaving Nathaniel standing in the living room with his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd said it now, put his feelings on the table. Whatever happened next was up to her. Dinner preparation became a chaotic symphony of childhood energy and maternal patience. Gabriel insisted on stirring the sauce, which resulted in more sauce on the counter than in the pot. Isaiah took charge of setting the table with meticulous precision, while Zara appointed herself quality control inspector, taste-testing everything with serious concentration. Nathaniel found himself assigned to garlic bread duty, a task that seemed simple until Gabriel decided to help by adding what appeared to be an entire bulb's worth of minced garlic to the butter mixture. That's a lot of garlic, buddy, Nathaniel observed, trying not to laugh. Garlic is good for you, Gabriel replied seriously. Mama says it keeps vampires away and helps when you have a cold. Your mama is very smart, Nathaniel agreed, catching Serena's amused glance across the kitchen. She's the smartest mama in the whole world, Zara declared with fierce loyalty. She knows how to fix everything that's broken and make everything better when we're sad. The praise made Serena blush, but Nathaniel could see the pride in her eyes. She'd raised these children to be confident, loving, and secure in her affection. It was an incredible achievement, especially considering she'd done it alone. As they moved around the kitchen together, Nathaniel was struck by how naturally the children included him in their routine. They corrected his stirring technique, showed him where the plates were kept, and explained the proper way to fold napkins like triangles, not squares, because triangles are fancier, according to Isaiah. Do you know how to cook other things? Gabriel asked as they transferred the garlic bread to the oven. Some things, Nathaniel replied. I make pretty good pancakes. Better than Mama's? Zara asked with the loyalty of a tiny bodyguard. Nobody makes better pancakes than your mama, Nathaniel said diplomatically, earning him an approving nod from Zara and a surprised smile from Serena. When dinner was finally ready, they gathered around a table that was clearly meant for 4, not 5. Nathaniel found himself squeezed between Isaiah and Gabriel, his knees bumping against the table legs, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd been so comfortable. The conversation flowed as easily as if they'd been sharing meals for years. Gabriel told elaborate stories about his day at daycare, complete with sound effects and dramatic gestures. Isaiah shared his latest theory about how dinosaurs might have learned to fly. They probably started by jumping really high, like from trees. Zara offered thoughtful observations about everything from the weather to the taste of the garlic bread. It's very garlicky, but in a good way. Tell us about your work, Zara said suddenly, fixing Nathaniel with that penetrating stare. What do you do all day? Nathaniel paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. How could he explain technology companies and market valuations to a 5-year-old? More importantly, how could he make his work sound meaningful when, sitting in this kitchen surrounded by this family, it all seemed so hollow? I work with computers, he said finally. I help people build programs that make computers do useful things. Like games? Gabriel asked hopefully. Sometimes like games, Nathaniel agreed. But also programs that help doctors take better care of sick people, or help teachers teach their students, or help families stay connected when they live far apart. Isaiah looked impressed. That sounds important. I thought it was, Nathaniel said quietly, his eyes finding Serena's across the table. But I'm learning that the most important things can't be programmed into a computer. Like what? Zara asked. Nathaniel looked around the table at 3 curious faces, then at Serena, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Like family dinners, he said simply. Like helping with homework and kissing scraped knees and reading bedtime stories. Like being there when the people you love need you most. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of what he'd said, the admission that his priorities had been wrong, that success meant nothing without people to share it with. Will you read us a bedtime story tonight? Isaiah asked suddenly, his voice hopeful but uncertain. Nathaniel looked at Serena, silently asking permission. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded slightly. If your mama says it's okay, Nathaniel replied. Can he, Mama? All 3 children asked in unison. One story, Serena agreed. And only if you eat all your vegetables and help clean up after dinner. The children attacked their broccoli with renewed enthusiasm, clearly motivated by the promise of this unprecedented treat. Nathaniel felt his heart swell with an emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. These children wanted him to read to them, wanted him to be part of their bedtime routine, despite only knowing him for a few hours. After dinner, cleanup became another family production. Gabriel was in charge of putting dirty dishes in the dishwasher. With significant supervision, Isaiah wiped down the table with the thoroughness of a professional housekeeper, and Zara organized the leftover garlic bread with military precision. Nathaniel found himself washing pots beside Serena, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked. The contact was electric, sending sparks of awareness through both of them despite the mundane nature of the task. They're incredible children, Nathaniel said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. They are, Serena agreed, pride evident in her voice. They're smart and kind and resilient. They've had to be. The last comment carried weight, a reminder of the struggles they'd faced without him. Serena, not now, she interrupted gently, glancing toward the children. Tonight is about them. Tomorrow we can talk about us. Nathaniel nodded, understanding. Tonight was about building connections with his children, about starting to earn the trust he'd forfeited 6 years ago. The conversation with Serena, the reckoning he knew was coming, could wait. Story time. Gabriel announced as the last dish was dried and put away. The bedtime routine was a well-orchestrated production that spoke of years of practice. Baths were taken in order of age, Isaiah first, then Gabriel, then Zara. Pajamas were donned, teeth were brushed, with only minor reminders about thoroughness, and then all 3 children piled onto Isaiah's bed for the promised story. Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed, feeling overwhelmed by the trust these small people were placing in him. In his hands was a well-worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, its pages soft from countless readings. This is one of our favorites, Zara informed him seriously. Mama does different voices for all the wild things. I'll do my best, Nathaniel promised, opening the book to the first page. As he began to read, doing his best impression of different voices for each character, Nathaniel felt something shift inside his chest. This was what he'd missed, not just the big milestones, but these quiet, intimate moments when love was expressed through presence, through attention, through the simple act of sharing a story. Gabriel fell asleep first, curling against Nathaniel's side with the absolute trust that only children possessed. Isaiah lasted until the wild rumpus but succumbed to exhaustion shortly after, his breathing evening out as sleep claimed him. Zara fought sleep the longest, as if afraid that closing her eyes might make this magical evening disappear. "Will you be here in the morning?" she whispered as Nathaniel tucked the blankets around her small form. The question broke his heart. "If your mama says it's okay," he replied softly. "I hope she says okay," Zara murmured, her eyes finally drifting closed. Nathaniel sat there for several minutes after all three children were asleep, watching their peaceful faces in the dim light from the hallway. These were his children, his blood, his legacy, his heart walking around outside his body. He'd missed so much already, but if Serena would let him, he'd spend the rest of his life making up for lost time. When he finally made his way downstairs, he found Serena in the kitchen, 2 cups of coffee on the counter and an expression on her face that suggested the easy camaraderie of dinner was over. Now came the hard part, the conversation that would determine whether this magical evening was the beginning of something new or a beautiful anomaly that would never be repeated. "They're asleep," he reported unnecessarily. "They like you," Serena observed, her voice carefully neutral. "I love them," Nathaniel replied without hesitation. "I know I have no right to say that after knowing them for only a few hours, but Serena, I love them completely." "Love isn't enough," she said quietly, handing him one of the coffee cups. "I learned that 6 years ago when the man who claimed to love me walked away because he was scared. The words stung because they were true." "I know," he said simply, "and I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But Serena, I'm not the same man who walked away. These 6 years, this success I thought I wanted, none of it means anything without you and our children." "Our children," she repeated, and there was something in her voice that suggested she was testing how the words felt. "For 6 years, they've been my children. I've been the one up all night with fevers, the one at every school event, the one making decisions and providing and protecting. You don't get to claim them just because you suddenly realized what you lost." Her anger was justified, and Nathaniel didn't try to defend himself. "You're right," he said simply. "They're your children because you earned that title every single day for 6 years. I'm asking for the chance to earn it too." Serena studied his face, searching for the fear that had driven him away before, looking for signs that this was temporary, that he would run again when things got difficult. "What changed?" she asked finally. "What happened to make you decide you wanted this now?" Nathaniel considered the question seriously. "I saw their pictures," he said finally, "and I realized that everything I'd built, everything I'd achieved, was meaningless because I'd built it on the foundation of the worst decision I'd ever made. I've been successful and miserable for 6 years, Serena. I want to try being present and happy instead. And if being a father is harder than you remember? If there are tantrums and sleepless nights and endless questions and responsibilities that can't be delegated to assistants, then I'll figure it out," Nathaniel said firmly. "The same way you did. The same way millions of parents do every day. I'm not saying it will be easy, but Serena, nothing worthwhile ever is." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the wall clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into evening quiet, porch lights beginning to flicker on as families concluded their own dinner routines and bedtime rituals. "One step at a time," Serena said finally, and Nathaniel felt hope bloom in his chest like spring after a brutal winter. "You can see them, spend time with them, but slowly. They've built a life that works, and I won't let you disrupt that unless you can prove you're committed to being part of it permanently." "Whatever you think is best," Nathaniel agreed immediately. "I'll follow your lead completely." "And Nathaniel," Serena's voice was soft but firm, "if you hurt them, if you make them love you and then disappear again, there won't be a second chance. I'll make sure you can never hurt them again." The threat should have intimidated him. Instead, it made him fall in love with her all over again. This fierce protection of their children, this strength that had carried her through 6 years of single motherhood, it was everything he'd lost when he walked away, everything he'd spent 6 years trying to fill with quarterly reports and board meetings. I won't hurt them, he promised, and meant it with every fiber of his being. I won't hurt any of you. Not again. As if on cue, a small voice called from upstairs. Mama? I had a bad dream. Serena was already moving toward the stairs. That's Gabriel, she explained. He sometimes has nightmares after exciting days. Without thinking, Nathaniel followed her upstairs, drawn by an instinct he didn't fully understand. They found Gabriel sitting up in his bed, tears streaming down his cheeks, his beloved dinosaur clutched tightly in his arms. What was the dream about, baby? Serena asked gently, sitting on the edge of his bed. The daddy went away again, Gabriel sobbed. He was here and then he was gone and you were sad and crying. Nathaniel felt his heart shatter. These children had been affected by his absence in ways he'd never imagined. They built their understanding of fathers around his absence, and now they were afraid to hope that he might stay. Oh, sweetheart, Serena murmured, gathering Gabriel into her arms. It was just a dream. But what if it's not? Gabriel asked, looking directly at Nathaniel with eyes that held far too much fear for a 5-year-old. What if he goes away again? Nathaniel knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to Gabriel's eye level. Can I tell you a secret? He asked softly. Gabriel nodded, wiping his nose on his pajama sleeve. I'm more scared than you are, Nathaniel admitted. I'm scared that I waited too long, that I made too big a mistake, that I might not be good enough to be your daddy. But you know what I'm not scared of anymore? What? Gabriel whispered. I'm not scared of staying, Nathaniel said firmly. I'm not scared of homework help and bedtime stories and teaching you about cars. I'm not scared of being here every day, even when it's hard. The only thing that scares me now is the idea of missing any more of your life. Gabriel considered this with the seriousness that seemed to run in the family. Promise? He asked finally. I promise, Nathaniel said, and he'd never meant anything more in his life. Gabriel seemed satisfied with this answer, settling back against his pillows with his dinosaur. Will you stay until I fall asleep? He asked. If your mama says it's okay, Nathaniel replied, looking at Serena for permission. She nodded, and they sat together in the dim room, taking turns telling Gabriel soft stories about brave dinosaurs and kind dragons until his breathing evened out and he drifted back to sleep. In the hallway outside Gabriel's room, Serena finally spoke. They're going to get attached to you, she said quietly. Probably very quickly. Children do that. They love completely and without reservation. If you're not sure about this, if there's any part of you that might run again, tell me now before they love you too much to survive losing you. Nathaniel looked through the doorway at Gabriel's sleeping form, then thought about Isaiah's trust and Zara's cautious hope. I'm sure, he said simply. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. As they made their way back downstairs, Nathaniel felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not the burden he'd feared 6 years ago, but the privilege he now understood it to be. These children were offering him their trust, their love, their future. He wouldn't waste this second chance. The evening was ending, and soon he would have to leave this warm house and return to his cold penthouse. But something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer an outsider looking in. He was a father learning to come home. 3 months had passed since that life-changing day in the park, and Nathaniel had kept every promise he'd made. What started as tentative weekend visits had gradually evolved into something that felt remarkably like a family routine. He'd moved out of his sterile penthouse and into a house just 2 blocks away, close enough to be present, far enough to respect the boundaries Serena had carefully established. Daddy, you're not stirring the pancakes right, Gabriel observed from his perch on a kitchen stool, his serious expression making him look like a miniature food critic. Mama stirs them in circles, not back and forth. You're absolutely right, Nathaniel agreed, adjusting his technique. Thank you for the correction, Chef Gabriel. It was Saturday morning, and Nathaniel had arrived early to help with breakfast, a tradition that had developed naturally over the past few weeks. These morning routines had become sacred to him. Gabriel's cooking commentary, Isaiah's methodical table setting, Zara's quality control inspections, and Serena's gentle orchestration of the beautiful chaos that was family life. The pancakes smell good, Zara announced from the doorway, her hair still messy from sleep. She'd grown less cautious around Nathaniel over the weeks, though she still watched him sometimes with those penetrating amber eyes, as if making sure he was really staying. They'd better, Isaiah added, appearing behind his sister with his usual morning precision, hair combed, pajamas neat, ready to tackle the day with characteristic organization. We have soccer practice at 10, and I need proper fuel for optimal performance. Nathaniel grinned at his son's formal language, a trait that reminded him of himself at that age. Well then, we better make sure these are the best pancakes in Oakland. The best pancakes in California, Gabriel corrected. The best pancakes in the whole world, Zara added, not to be outdone. The best pancakes in the universe, Isaiah concluded with 5-year-old finality. Serena appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Nathaniel's heart did that familiar skip it had been doing for 3 months straight. She was beautiful in the morning light, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing one of his old t-shirts that she'd claimed after he'd left it there weeks ago. What are we declaring the best in the universe? She asked, accepting the coffee Nathaniel handed her with a smile that had grown warmer and more trusting with each passing day. Daddy's pancakes, the children chorused. Well then, Serena said, settling into her chair at the kitchen table, I'd better try one to verify this scientific claim. As they sat around the table sharing breakfast, Nathaniel marveled at how natural this felt. The children chattered about their plans for the day, soccer practice, followed by a trip to the Children's Museum, then dinner at their grandmother's house. It was the kind of ordinary family Saturday that Nathaniel had never experienced growing up, and certainly never thought he'd want it. Now he couldn't imagine wanting anything else. Daddy, Zara said suddenly, fixing him with that serious stare, Mrs. Patterson at school asked me about you yesterday. Nathaniel's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Oh, what did she want to know? She asked if you were really our father, because Tommy's mom said you were rich and famous and probably just pretending to care about us for publicity. The kitchen fell silent. This was the challenge Nathaniel had been dreading, the moment when the outside world intruded on the fragile family they'd been building. Serena's face had gone carefully neutral, but he could see the protective tension in her shoulders. What did you tell Mrs. Patterson? Nathaniel asked gently. Zara lifted her chin with that characteristic defiance. I told her that money doesn't make someone a good daddy, but reading bedtime stories and helping with homework and showing up when you promise to does. And I told her that our daddy shows up. The simple faith in her words nearly undid him. That's exactly right, sweetheart. And Zara? Tommy's mom is wrong. I don't care about publicity. I only care about you and Gabriel and Isaiah and your mama. That's what I thought, Zara said with satisfaction, returning to her pancakes as if the matter was settled. But Nathaniel could see that it wasn't settled for Serena. Later, as the children played in the backyard and they cleaned up the kitchen together, she brought it up again. This is going to keep happening, she said quietly, scrubbing a pan with more force than necessary. People are going to have opinions about us, about why you're here, about whether this is real. Does it matter what they think? Nathaniel asked, moving to stand beside her at the sink. It matters if it affects the children, Serena replied. They've been through enough confusion about family. I won't have them questioning whether their father's love is genuine because some stranger planted doubt in their minds. Nathaniel gently took the pan from her hands and set it aside, then turned her to face him. Then we make sure they never have to question it, he said firmly. We make our commitment to this family so clear, so consistent, that no outside opinion can shake it. And how do we do that? Serena asked, vulnerability flickering in her dark eyes. We get married, Nathaniel said simply. The words hung in the air between them, and Serena's eyes widened with shock. Nathaniel, that's not, we haven't even. I know, he said quickly. I know we're not there yet. You don't trust me completely, and you have every right not to. But Serena, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that this is real, that my love for you and our children isn't going anywhere. Before Serena could respond, Isaiah's voice rang out from the backyard. Mama, Daddy, Gabriel's stuck in the tree again. They rushed outside to find Gabriel perched precariously on a high branch, grinning down at them with the particular mixture of pride and panic that came with successful but slightly regrettable adventures. How did you get up there? Serena called, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. I climbed, Gabriel replied cheerfully. But now I can't remember how to get down. Stay right there, Nathaniel called, already moving toward the tree. Don't move a muscle, okay? What followed was a careful rescue operation that involved Nathaniel climbing the tree while Serena spotted from below and Isaiah provided detailed safety instructions from the ground. Zara appointed herself emergency coordinator, running into the house to fetch band-aids just in case. By the time Gabriel was safely on the ground, the whole family was laughing, and the serious conversation from the kitchen felt like it belonged to another day. But that evening, after soccer practice and the museum and dinner at Grandma's house, when the children were finally asleep and Nathaniel was preparing to head home to his own house, Serena stopped him at the door. "Stay," she said quietly. "Serena, I don't want to push." "I'm not asking you to push," she interrupted. "I'm asking you to stay. Here. Tonight. With us." The invitation was loaded with possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Serena took his hand and led him upstairs to her bedroom, the room he'd dreamed about for 6 years, the space that represented the intimacy and trust he'd been slowly earning back. "I've been thinking about what you said," she murmured as they stood beside her bed, moonlight streaming through the windows. "About marriage, about making our commitment clear." And Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper. "And I realized that I've been so afraid of being hurt again that I haven't let myself acknowledge what's been happening these past 3 months. She looked up at him with eyes that held 6 years of pain, but also 3 months of healing. "I'm falling in love with you again, Nathaniel. Not the boy who left, but the man who came back." The kiss that followed was gentle and desperate and full of promise. It spoke of second chances and hard-won trust, and the kind of love that survives even the cruelest of separations. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you too," Nathaniel whispered against her forehead. "I never stopped, but this feels different. Deeper. Like we're building something new instead of trying to recapture something old." "We are building something new," Serena agreed. "A family. A real one this time." That night, as they lay together in the darkness with Nathaniel's arms around her and the soft sounds of their children sleeping down the hall, Serena felt a peace she hadn't experienced in 6 years. This was what wholeness felt like, not just surviving as a single mother, but thriving as part of a complete family. "Nathaniel," she whispered into the darkness. Ask me again." "Ask you what?" "You know what." Nathaniel shifted so he could see her face in the moonlight. "Serena Washington, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you and our incredible children?" "Yes," she whispered, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. The next morning brought the chaos of 3 excited 5-year-olds discovering their father had spent the night and was making breakfast again. The questions came rapid fire. "Does this mean Daddy lives here now? Are you and Mama married? Can we have waffles instead of pancakes?" Nathaniel and Serena exchanged glances over their coffee cups, and something passed between them. Understanding, commitment, the recognition that they were about to make this official. "Actually," Serena said, gathering all 3 children around the kitchen table, "your daddy and I have something to tell you." The children immediately gave her their full attention, their young faces serious and expectant. "Your daddy asked me to marry him," Serena continued, "and I said yes." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gabriel cheered and jumped up and down. Isaiah clapped his hands with dignified approval. Zara, their little protector, looked directly at Nathaniel with those piercing amber eyes. "Does this mean you're really, truly staying forever?" she asked. "Forever and always," Nathaniel confirmed solemnly. "If you'll have me." Zara considered this for a moment, then nodded once, decisively. "Okay then, but I get to help plan the wedding." "We all get to help," Gabriel added excitedly. "It should be in the backyard," Isaiah suggested with his characteristic practicality. "That way everyone can see Mama's garden." As the children dissolved into excited planning chatter, Nathaniel reached across the table and took Serena's hand. 6 months ago, he'd been a successful but lonely billionaire who thought he had everything. Now he understood what having everything actually meant. It meant Saturday morning pancakes and bedtime stories and soccer practices. It meant being needed and trusted and loved unconditionally. It meant 3 children who called him daddy and meant it, and a woman who'd forgiven the unforgivable and given him a second chance at the only thing that truly mattered. The wedding, when it happened 6 months later, was exactly what Isaiah had suggested, a backyard celebration in Serena's garden, surrounded by family and friends and the community that had embraced their story. The children served as the wedding party, walking down the aisle with serious concentration and beaming smiles. But the real celebration had happened months earlier, in quiet moments and ordinary days, in the gradual building of trust and the daily choice to show up, to be present, to love without reservation. As Nathaniel looked around the backyard at their wedding reception, watching Gabriel teach his new grandfather about dinosaurs, seeing Isaiah organize a complicated game involving multiple cousins, observing Zara hold court with a group of adults who were clearly charmed by her serious observations about life, he felt a completeness that no amount of money or success had ever provided. No regrets? Serena asked, slipping her hand into his as they watched their children play. Only one, Nathaniel replied, surprising her. What's that? That it took me 6 years to come home. Serena squeezed his hand, her wedding ring catching the afternoon sunlight. You're here now, she said simply. That's what matters. And she was right. The past was past, but the future stretched out before them, bright with possibility and rich with love. They'd built something beautiful from the ashes of their first relationship, not just a marriage, but a family. Not just forgiveness, but transformation. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from our greatest mistakes, if we're brave enough to face them and fight for what truly matters. Nathaniel had learned that success without family is empty, that love requires presence, not just promises, and that second chances are precious precisely because they're not guaranteed. As the sun set over their celebration and their children fell asleep in various relatives' arms, exhausted by joy and excitement, Nathaniel and Serena stood together in their garden, surrounded by the life they'd built together. They'd come full circle, but they were different people now, stronger, wiser, more grateful for the ordinary magic of family love. And as they looked toward their future together, they knew that the best was yet to come. What does this story teach us about love, forgiveness, and second chances? That it's never too late to choose what matters most. That children's hearts are remarkably forgiving when love is genuine. That real success is measured not in dollars, but in the depth of our relationships and the legacy we leave in the hearts of those we love. Share in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between ambition and love? What would you do if given a second chance to make things right with the people who matter most? And if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear about the transformative power of never giving up on love. Remember to subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more powerful stories about love, redemption, and the courage to fight for what truly matters. Because in the end, the only success that counts is the success we share with the people we love. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of second chances and unconditional love. Sometimes the most beautiful stories are about finding our way back home to the people who matter most.